I ran my very first 100-mile ultramarathon at Tunnel Hill in Vienna, Illinois. This is how it went.
This is me at mile 1 of a 100-mile ultramarathon. 75 miles until we cross the finish line.
Right, how you feeling?
I feel good. 25 miles until we cross the finish line.
I chose Tunnel Hill 100 for my very first ultramarathon for 3 reasons. Number 1, the location. Just a 5.5-hour drive down south, we could bring all of the supplies that we would need inside of our car. Marathons come with a lot of stuff, and flying with any of those items would have been a pain. Number 2, the time of year. I had my first 50-mile ultramarathon in April. I ran the Chicago Marathon in October, and I wanted to have enough time to recover post-Chicago Marathon pre-100 miles. This race, which started on November 9th, lined up perfectly. And finally, number 3, Tunnel Hill 100 is known for being very flat and very fast. Let's dive into the training. I think this was probably the hardest part. My ultimate goal in training was to work my way up to a few 100-mile weeks. I was actually able to log 2 full 100-mile weeks with a few 90s and 95s to prep. It included a ton of easy runs, a lot of treadmill work, throw in a bit of speed work in there because I was running the Chicago Marathon, however, not as much as I wish that I would have. On an average week, I was doing 2 pretty decently sized long runs, maybe a 15-mile and an 18 to a 20-miler. The other days of the week, I had a lot of 2-a-days, trying to split the runs up in between 5 and 5 or 6 and 6. I was not prepared for these 2 things during training. Number 1, how absolutely exhausted that I would be throughout the process. My brain was never firing on all cylinders, and my body was just always ready to take a nap. There's no other way to describe it. 2, I was not prepared for how much running would take over my life. Every single part of my day was surrounded by when will I fit my run in. It really took over, and I'm lucky that I'm in a spot right now that I love running. Running is a passion of mine. Running is half of my full-time job. However, if that wasn't the case, I think I would have a really, really difficult time training for this race. I like to think that this training block started early this year prior to my 50-mile ultramarathon, and that my 50-mile was kind of intermixed in it. In a real training block situation, I probably officially started training for my 100 miles in June with a November race. However, that 50-mile ultramarathon came with a ton of solid base build. We're looking at just June until November. My longest run of the training block was 27 miles to celebrate my 27th birthday on August 29th. Other long runs included several 20-milers, and then of course the Chicago Marathon on October 13th. We arrived in Vienna, Illinois on Friday night and discovered that there would be drop bags. We ended up going to Target and getting just clear boxes. We got 3 each, and we filled them to the brim with anything that we could possibly need. Good thing we had a lot of knowledge from Chase's Last Man Standing ultramarathons, as well as other ultramarathons and races that he's done. We packed everything. I had 3 pairs of shoes. I had 3 to 4 completely new outfits, bars, goos, every single type of medication that you could possibly need, extra batteries, an entire charging block for my phone, protein, Band-Aids, Tums, a lot of plastic bags. It was supposed to rain on race day, extra hair ties, a lot of deodorant, ton of Vaseline, salt stick, lots of salt stick. All of this was mixed pretty evenly throughout each of our boxes, and of course, if I ran out of something and Chase had it in his box, I could use it too. Choosing what to wear for this race was very difficult because it was supposed to rain for the entirety of the race. It was also going to be a very strange temperature where while we were moving, we would know we would be very warm, but anytime we stopped, we know we would get cold very fast. Starting at my feet, I wore the Brooks Glycerin Max. I have never done a very, very long run in these. The longest run that I did in these prior to wearing them for this race was 13 miles. I have worked with Brooks this year, and I was talking to a few of the shoe techs, and they highly, highly recommend that I try to wear these for the race. So I did. Felt fantastic. I had almost 0 foot issues. You're gonna have some blisters and things, of course, when you're on your feet for 22 hours. They held up well. When it did rain, they drained well. And it was great for the terrain that we were on. I think if it was more of a technical course, probably would have had to pick a trail shoe. For socks, Chase recommended this brand called Creepers, and I think it made a huge difference because my toes weren't rubbing together the entire time, and the only blisters that I got were on the outsides of my feet. Leggings were Brooks. I actually wore this hoodie with a long sleeve shirt underneath, and then the High Point waterproof jacket. Expected to change 4 times, I changed 0 times. This is something that I kind of regret just based on how gross that I felt. However, I don't regret it because it saved us so much time. Every time I thought about changing, I knew that I would need to take my shoes and my socks off. I was nervous that if I moved around my shoe, took off my socks too much, that I would actually be in a bit more pain or cause the blister to pop or get new blisters in new places versus just dealing with the ones that I had. If I would do that again, but for this race, it made a lot of sense. Some of the key details in the race in itself. Having gone to a few different ultramarathons, helping to crew Chase, I do feel that this race was very well run, very well supported, and very well organized. Terrain was, as promised, flat and fast. It wasn't necessarily gravel. There were a few areas with a ton of rocks. However, it was more of like a dirt, I guess like chopped up limestone is what they call it, path. Very easy to run on. It did collect water very fast, so we were nervous when it started downpouring that it was going to be very difficult to run through, and actually dried up very quickly, which we were happy with. 2 aid stations, I don't think I truly paid much attention to them until later on in the race. We ended up doing about 60% of this race in the dark just because of how daylight savings works. The sun set, I think, at around 4 p.m. and we finished running around 5 or 6 a.m. From what I do remember, there was an aid station about every 5 miles. This had pretty much anything that you would possibly need. Bathrooms, which was huge. The drop bags were at specific spots. We didn't do enough research prior to know where the heck they would be. If you do Tunnel Hill 100, look at where the drop bags will be and make sure you get it right. One of the mistakes we actually made was we thought that one of the spots for the drop bags was going to be at that halfway point at mile 50. We had both decided at mile 50, we're going to take a little bit longer of a break. We're going to change, refresh. Turned out to be a good thing that we put those drop bags at a different location and we weren't able to change, and instead we just had to keep moving because that was when it started to get dark. So we were able to chop off a lot more miles before it started to get pitch black. The most challenging part of the course I wish somebody would have warned me about is there is one aid station that is a 7-mile stretch. Miles in the grand scheme of things does not feel long. However, when you have been anticipating a aid station every 5 miles, which in an ultramarathon for us was about maybe every hour, extra 20 to 30 minutes is pure agony. Those 7-mile stretches, I remember both of us just saying, we just need to keep moving, do not stop. They had a water station, so we were able to refill water about a bit halfway through, which was very helpful. I remember mentally those were like very dark places for me because I didn't have anything to look forward to for so long. The hardest part was about mile 60. That is when it really set into me that it was pitch black, that I had to be running now through the entire night. And I also believe that it started downpour raining right about this time. I just knew there was a world of hurt to come. There's a few mental things that I did throughout this race. Number 1 was never let myself be almost done. I fully convinced myself, and if anyone asked me how much longer we had left, I would do the math weird. I told myself I had to run 150 miles on race day. Mistake during the Chicago Marathon and allowed myself to be almost done at mile 20, and I think that's where my race really went to. So we were not gonna make that mistake again, especially in a race this large. Decided that on race day I was running 150 miles and no one else could tell me otherwise, and if I just happened to cross the finish line before then I do. The thing that I did mentally throughout this race is constantly having positive mantras in my mind. There were of course negative thoughts that come up. There were of course negative thoughts like, why am I doing this? Why would I put myself through this? This is boring, I hate this. Do I even like running? Why am I out here in the cold? Everyone smells, everyone's stinky, I don't wanna be stinky. A few of the mantras that I always repeat in my head: I am strong, this is easy, I can do this, I'm happy to be here, I am so blessed, I am so lucky, I love this, I love life. It's a mouthful, but I say it in my head and definitely not out loud unless I really need to. Finally, my last kind of rule or like mental game that I did for myself is I did not allow myself to complain at all. Chase can attest to this, I did not complain once. I would acknowledge maybe like, oh, it's raining. But then in my mind, I would simply say, I love rain. Rain is great. It's not even raining. This is beautiful. I remember one point I was really hurting. It was at mile 40. We just stopped at an aid station. And I think I was just hungry. I was starting to get cranky. Chase filmed a video and he said, Rye, how you doing? And all I could say was, I feel good.
We're currently at mile 40 of 100 at Tunnel Hill 100. Rye, how you feeling?
I feel good. I'm happy to be here.
Nice.
Moment, all I wanted to do was complain. However, I didn't, and I do think that that kept my mind going. The finish line moment was so fun. Across the finish line, we actually asked them if we could film us crossing the finish line again because we didn't think that anyone had filmed us crossing it, and of course, we would want that.
Go, Riley!
It was just kind of like a, okay, what the heck are we supposed to do now moment. We went into the car, we slept for a bit, woke up, got breakfast, went back to the hotel, and I just kept repeating, I can't believe I just ran 100 miles. I can't believe I just ran 100 miles over and over and over again. And I've still been doing that this entire week. Let's get into why you're here. Let's talk about some of the challenges. I'm going to be honest, we did not have too many challenges. We had a great day, both of us, which made a huge difference. When I'm asked, was the race hard? I actually say no. The race was not hard. I think the training, as I mentioned earlier, was 10 times more challenging. I think I was so lucky to be supported by Chase the entire way through and have that company. And I felt very, very physically and mentally prepared. If I were to do this race 4 years ago, prior to any Ironman, prior to a 50-mile ultramarathon, prior to starting my own business, I think it would have been a very different mental game. I don't think I would have had the mental maturity enough at that point, Riley, 4 years ago, to get through this race. But all of the lessons that I've learned throughout this past journey of Ironman and all of these running endeavors that I've done, I felt prepared. The hardest part, and something that I did not practice at all in training that I wish that I would have, was the 60% of darkness. The worst moments that I can remember was, it was downpouring rain. We had just approached an aid station. I went to the bathroom. I noticed that I was chafing. I was starting to feel sorry for myself. We went to the food area. I remember seeing candy and snacks and sweets, and all that I wanted were candy and snacks and sweets because I wanted to make myself feel better. And Chase said, no, we are going to have soup and broth. And it did sound good because it was warm, but it wasn't candy, so it wasn't as yummy and delicious. So we're sipping on the broth, and that was like an insane moment of like pure pleasure. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so warm. This is warming up from my core. I was on such a high underneath the tent, sipping on some warm soup. And then all of a sudden we realized that we had to go out and run another, I think at that point, like 35 miles. And my heart just kind of sank. I didn't let Chase know about this moment, but I was feeling so good and so cozy for just a moment that the last thing that I wanted to do was run. Other than that moment, which I don't know why I play a lot of mind games when I'm running, and I do a lot of convincing myself of things that aren't real or are real, which is very interesting, and it does help me. I don't know if that would help everyone. I think one of the other hardest challenges was I cried a ton during this race. I don't necessarily know what I was crying about. I tried to talk it out loud to Chase and say, this is why I'm crying, this is what's going on, but I just couldn't stop crying. I think there was maybe like a 10-mile stretch where I just had tears just falling down, and it wasn't like a sob, it wasn't like a happy cry, it wasn't a sad cry, it was just a release, it was just a cry. And I don't know if it was because I was alone with my own thoughts for so long, and of course I had Chase there, but we didn't really talk much during the race. I really think I've been so used to having so many distractions all of the time that silence actually like made me emotional. So that's something that I'm definitely going to work on just in my daily life, is try to potentially work on limiting those amount of distractions. But if I was alone, I don't know how those moments would have gone differently. But I did cry a lot. Okay, let's dive into some of the highlights of the race, which I do think that there are more highlights than negative points. We had a really good day. One of my favorite moments was the fact that I fully convinced myself that I was eating a burger, but it was actually a bagel.
That's the best burger I've ever had in my entire life.
I don't know why, I think it was at mile 70, maybe 75-ish. I was craving a burger, probably the iron, probably some real food, probably some real protein. And the only thing that I could set my mind to was, in a little bit, I'm going to eat a burger. I really thought that there was going to be a burger at the next aid station. To my disappointment, there was no burger at the next aid station. But I did not let that kill my vibe. and I had a bagel in my bag. And so I looked at it and I told myself, this is the best burger that I've ever eaten in my entire life. And I just pretended this bagel was a burger. And that was one of my favorite moments. The easiest and best part, and I will sing this to the world, is that I had Chase there with me the entire time. He has so much knowledge, so much experience with ultra running and the space, with the mentality, with the pacing, with the keep moving. I genuinely don't know if I could have done this race without him, and I honestly don't want to find out if I could do this race without him. Having him there by my side, knowing that we run at the same pace the entire way was so nice. And it was so nice too, knowing that it wasn't somebody that I just met that I needed to entertain, to just enjoy each other's company and run side by side. And if we needed something, we both knew that we would support each other in that moment, no matter what. We knew that we weren't gonna leave each other at any point. I asked him at the end, I was like, if I was ever dying, were you just gonna go? And he said, absolutely not. And I felt the same way. So I think that was the best, my favorite part is the fact that we got to do this together. We didn't do a lot of our training together. He was training for other races at the time, but the fact that we got to both be fit enough to run 100 miles together was my all-time favorite moment, and I'm so proud of us, and I'm so grateful that he was able to do this one with me. Can you run this race without crew? We went into this race knowing that we would be self-supported. We felt comfortable enough, and I felt comfortable enough with Chase's experience that if something were to go wrong, he would not only be able to handle it for both of us, but he would also be able to keep running. I'm personally very happy with our decision to not have crew. I think that I probably would have wasted a bit more time at aid stations, talking and hanging out with them. This is a mistake that I made during my 50-mile ultramarathon because it was kind of a loop and you'd always go back to the car. I was so lucky and blessed to have so many friends and family who came to the race, and I just wanted to hang out with them because I love them so much. And I think that wasted a lot of time. When it comes to a race of this capacity, 100 miles, I didn't want to waste any time. I didn't want to waste an hour of just chit-chatting. I wanted to constantly be moving. So I think as a distraction, which is how crew sometimes is for me, because I just love my friends and family and want to hang out with them, I think it was more beneficial for me to not feel that comfort and know that the only thing that I could do was just keep running versus hanging out and asking them about their days. The last chunk, I promise, let's go through some of the takeaways. I would rate this race a 9 out of 10. The only reason that it is not a 10 out of 10 is because of the time of year. It was dark 60% of the time. That is not something that I enjoy, especially as a woman. I definitely would not enjoy running in the dark alone without Chase next to me the entire way. It was flat, it was fast, it was well run. All of the volunteers were so incredibly nice. The buckles were freaking cool. We got a sub 24-hour buckle. It has gold on it. It looks like it's being Chase running. It is so fun. If I were to run 100 miles again, I would 100% do this course. I would recommend this course, and it was overall just an incredible experience. I think that if anybody wants to, they can run 100 miles. And the emphasis is on wants to. It has to be a reason you want to run a race this long to get you across the finish line. When it came to level of difficulty, I almost think that the Chicago Marathon this year, me trying to run a fast marathon, was much more difficult because you had to be dialed in completely for every single second. Versus the 100 miles, it was kind of a leisurely, long, you just keep moving, you just keep going, you just tell yourself you have to keep going race. Versus the marathon, you didn't even have a second to waste. If you're thinking about running 100 miles, be prepared for a very, very difficult training block. I do think that there are some runners who could probably get away with running less mileage and still have a successful race. I do think it's more mental than anything, but I also think that the intense training helped my mental game, knowing that, okay, if I can run 100 miles in a week, I can run 100 miles in a race. Some runners might not need that. I did. It's very important to test different fuel strategies. This is a part of the reason why I wanted to do a 50 miler before I did 100, so that I had that amount of time to practice what the fueling would look like and test and learn. Test and learned that I needed a lot more salt than I took in. Example, the increase of the salt stick. I am so incredibly proud of myself for deciding that I wanted to do this, going all in, committing to it, training very well, training very efficiently, effectively, appropriately, hard, and getting the job done. To me, that is what this is. It is going through the process and getting the job done. I always want to have fun along the way, and I'm still having fun, which is why I still am so excited to share more running journeys with you. But 100% run 100 miles again. I do think a challenge would be probably to pick a race with a bit more elevation, potentially only have Chase pace me at the nighttime instead of the whole race. I think those things would definitely make it more challenging, but I am so glad that for my first 100-mile ultramarathon, I had Chase with me the entire way. I got to run on a course that I felt very, very safe and comfortable on, and I ran a freaking 100 miles. I went through as much as the race as I possibly could think of, but of course we were running for 22 hours and 27 minutes, so there are probably pieces that I missed. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comment section. Make sure that you subscribe, and I am so, so excited to tell you about what 2025 will look like. Until then, I am just focusing on enjoying running, taking it easy, building back strength, and planning out my next races. Thanks for being here. Bye.